We're about to begin a brand new love journey. Comment where you're watching from so we can see that our Soul Stories family is all around the world. The twilight sun spread warm golden streaks across Lake Tahoe. Lakewood Estate glowed like a lakeside castle, shimmering with thousands of hanging lights and the soft strains of music. White ribbons were draped from the wooden eaves, mingling with the faint scent of lavender that drifted in the breeze, creating a wedding atmosphere that was both elegant and intimate. Clara Bennett adjusted the little bow tie on her son's shirt collar. The 5-year-old, dressed in a tiny black suit, stood with his hands on his hips, his sparkling blue eyes reflecting the lights like gems. "Mommy, do I look handsome?" Noah tilted his head up, his voice brimming with confidence, though his little hands still fumbled with the hem of his slightly oversized shirt. Clara smiled softly, her heart aching tenderly. The most handsome boy at this whole party. But she bent down, fixing the bow that had slipped to one side. "Mommy's hero needs to wear his shoes on the right feet." Noah burst into giggles as she switched his shoes, then skipped happily around the waiting room. Watching his innocence, Clara felt a fragile joy rise inside her, tinged with bittersweetness. For 5 years she had raised Noah alone, shielding him, worrying, and filling in for the father's absence. The price of that decision was that she had learned to live closed off, avoiding parties, setups, and even love. "Mommy, hurry! I want to see Aunt Maggie in her wedding dress." Noah tugged at her hand, his voice eager. Clara took a deep breath. Maggie's wedding, her best friend, was a rare exception she allowed herself to attend. Partly because of Maggie's heartfelt invitation, but also she wanted Noah to know what a celebration filled with joy, love, and happiness looked like. She believed those beautiful memories would nourish her son's innocent soul. Hand in hand, they entered the reception hall. The grand space was filled with white flowers and flickering candlelight. Guests chatted cheerfully, laughter blending with the graceful notes of a violin. Noah gazed up at the high ceiling, his eyes glowing as if he had stepped into a fairy tale world. Clara tried to keep calm, though her heart pounded hard in her chest. Ever since agreeing to come here, a quiet unease had gnawed at her, an instinct that something was about to happen. And that instinct wasn't wrong. Amid the sea of elegant gowns and suits, in a corner bathed in soft golden light, a figure caught her eye. A man in a dark suit sat silently in a wheelchair. His frame was tall, even when seated, his stern face marked by time and pain. Yet his eyes still carried a deep intensity, an undeniable pull. Clara froze. She recognized him instantly. Peter Cole. Her breath caught. Her hand, clutching Noah's, trembled. It had been 5 years since she and Peter parted in despair. 5 years without a meeting, a call, a single message. She had once believed he chose his career and far-flung travels over their little family. And now, here he was, in front of her, in the flesh, but changed. No longer the confident young businessman, but a man in a wheelchair, his eyes shadowed with sorrow. "Mommy!" Noah's curious voice rose. "Who's that?" Before Clara could react, Noah let go of her hand. His small feet pattered across the floor toward the man, who felt both unfamiliar and hauntingly familiar. "Noah, don't!" Clara cried out, panic gripping her chest. The boy stopped right in front of Peter, tilting his head back, his blue eyes shining, and then broke into a radiant smile. "Daddy!" Just that one word, and the air seemed to freeze. Peter looked up. His eyes widened slightly, reflecting the boy with curly copper-brown hair, the exact shade Peter had as a child. Noah's face, the line of his jaw, even the light in his eyes, all of it mirrored him like a small copy. In that moment, time seemed to stop. Clara stood paralyzed in the middle of the hall, her face pale, her heart drowning in fear. The secret she had guarded for 5 long years shattered with one innocent word from her son. Peter said nothing. He simply extended his hand. Noah grasped it naturally, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. As for Clara, her heart sank heavy, panic and turmoil flooding her. Every path of escape seemed closed. She knew from that moment on her past and present had collided, and she could no longer run away. The soft golden lights in the banquet hall fell across Peter Cole's face, sharpening every weary line and making his deep-set eyes even more striking. Noah looked up at him intently, then suddenly broke into a radiant smile, his small voice steady but certain. "Daddy, I knew it." Clara froze. Her heart pounded violently against her chest, her lips trembling but unable to form a word. Peter tilted his head slightly, his gaze locked on the boy in front of him. He studied Noah, his copper-brown hair, the bright blue eyes, the slightly pointed chin. It was as if he were staring at a mirror of his own childhood. A wave of shock swept through him, his hand on the armrest of the wheelchair beginning to tremble. His voice came out hoarse as though lost between past and present. "Clara, is this my son?" Clara's throat tightened. In that instant, all she wanted was to turn and run, but her legs felt rooted to the polished floor. Peter's eyes, stunned and pained, held her captive. Noah, oblivious to the storm rising between the adults, tilted his head and continued in his innocent voice. "I saw a picture of you with Mommy at home. There's one in a wooden frame. Mommy keeps it on the high shelf. I had to stand on a chair to reach it." Clara's face paled. She had forgotten about that old photograph, the one she couldn't throw away, yet never dared display. Noah had stumbled upon it once, and from then on he believed the man in it was his father. "I knew you would come find me," Noah declared firmly, gripping Peter's hand as if afraid someone might pull them apart. Suddenly, the bustling wedding hall felt as though only the three of them remained. The laughter, the chatter, the graceful violin music, all faded into the background. Peter turned his eyes on Clara, fury glinting through the pain he tried to hold back. "You kept this from me for 5 years?" Clara bit her lip, her fingers tightening around her small clutch. She could hear the accusation in every word, but all she could do was shake her head in despair. "Peter, it's not what you think." Not what I think," he cut her off, his voice trembling but sharp with restraint. "The boy calls me Dad. He looks exactly like me. And you, Clara, you stand here in silence as if this were all some kind of mistake." Shame, guilt, and helplessness burned in Clara's eyes. She wanted to explain that she had sent emails, made calls, and tried to reach out, but never received a reply. That in her desperation, she had chosen to protect Noah from the pain of abandonment. But under his gaze, every word died in her throat. As tension thickened between them, Noah suddenly exclaimed, his eyes lighting up with excitement as he remembered something. "Daddy, I heard there's a chocolate fountain. Come with me." Before Clara could react, the boy tugged at Peter's hand, his little feet scampering toward the corner of the hall where the fountain sent the sweet aroma of melted chocolate into the air. Clara stood stunned, watching them. For a brief moment, the tight bands of fear around her chest loosened. Noah's innocence was the fragile thread tying them all together, a small, miraculous bridge. Peter remained silent, allowing the boy to lead him. For the first time in years, his heart beat wildly. The feeling was both unfamiliar and achingly familiar. A small hand trusting him completely, pulling him along without condition, without reason. Clara followed slowly, her eyes brimming with tears. Inside her swirled a storm of emotions, fear, but also a faint glimmer of hope. Noah stopped in front of the chocolate fountain, his voice bubbling with joy. "Daddy, Mommy, look! I want to dip the first strawberry." Peter let out a soft laugh, a rare sound that lit up a face long hardened by pain and loss. Carefully, he helped Noah spear a strawberry, then guided him to dip it into the flowing chocolate. Clara stood beside them, quietly watching. In that moment, she realized some truths could never stay hidden. No matter how fiercely she tried to protect him, the bond between father and son had found its way, through a smile, a glance, and a single innocent word. And for her, life had just turned down a path from which there was no return. Music still drifted through the banquet hall, each tender violin note as if trying to mask the storms quietly raging within. But for Clara, the sound only deepened the ache in her chest. She and Peter sat in a quiet corner, away from the chocolate fountain where Noah was happily devouring strawberries. The silence stretched on, so suffocating that Clara wanted to get up and leave. But Peter's eyes, steady, filled with questions, held her in place. Do you plan to stay silent forever? His voice was low, a mix of anger and disappointment. Clara pressed her lips together, her hand trembling on the fabric of her dress. Then she drew in a deep breath, as if gathering all her courage to unlock the memories she had buried for so long. Do you remember why we divorced 5 years ago? Peter frowned. Of course, because I was consumed by work. A bitter smile flickered across Clara's lips. Not just consumed. You abandoned me. You abandoned the marriage we promised to protect. Every day you were gone, every trip dragged on endlessly. I sat alone in our empty apartment, staring at your suitcase always packed by the door. And I knew I was no longer your priority. Her voice caught. The image of that rainy night came rushing back, standing in the cold kitchen, waiting for the sound of his footsteps, but only silence greeted her. And the next morning, another rushed note from him, another months-long business trip. After the divorce, Clara's voice softened, her eyes blurring. I found out I was pregnant. At that moment, I almost collapsed, alone, losing my marriage, and about to become a mother. I tried to reach you, Peter. I sent emails, I called your office. I even asked others to deliver messages. But everything disappeared into the void. Peter's hands tightened on the wheelchair's armrests, his eyes darkening. I never knew. Clara, I swear to you. Never knew. Clara let out a hollow laugh, her voice laced with bitterness. I knocked on the door, but it was never opened. The air between them froze. Then Peter lifted his head, inhaling sharply as if to steady himself, his eyes burning with both intensity and pain. Clara, let me tell you, why couldn't you find me? She faltered, her heart pounding. Right after we signed the divorce papers, I accepted a rainforest survey project in South America. It was a big opportunity, but also my way of running from the pain of losing you. His voice cracked. 3 weeks after arriving, a landslide struck. The entire team was buried under mud. I survived barely, but my spine was severely injured. When I woke up in a field hospital, I couldn't move my legs anymore. Clara's mouth fell open, her hands clutching at her dress. His words cut into her like a blade. I didn't know. Of course not. I was unconscious for weeks. All communication was cut off. When I finally returned to the U.S., I spent months in rehabilitation, learning to accept that I would live the rest of my life in a wheelchair. Peter lowered his head, his voice hoarse. During that time, I thought, maybe you had already forgotten me, and that I no longer deserved a place in your life. Clara's eyes blurred with tears. Each word he spoke stripped away the dust that had covered the truth, exposing a painful reality. They had lost each other not only from impatience, but because of events beyond their control. Peter, her voice trembled as she spoke his name, I thought you chose to disappear. I thought you chose your work, your risks, over me and our child. Peter lifted his gaze, his eyes bloodshot. I never knew you were pregnant. If I had known, Clara, if I had known, I swear I would have come back, at any cost. The moment hung heavy, filled with silence. Only Noah's innocent laughter carried across the hall, twisting the knife of regret deeper. For 5 years, their child had grown up fatherless, simply because they had let misunderstanding and silence stand between them. Clara wiped her tears, whispering, We've already lost too much time. Peter raised his hand, trembling but resolute. I don't want to lose another second. Their eyes met, wet with tears, yet burning bright. Deep down, both of them knew the wounds of the past would still hurt, but in this moment, they were opening the door to healing. The banquet hall grew livelier as guests began streaming out to the garden to take photos with the bride and groom. Inside, the corner table near the wide window overlooking Lake Tahoe became quiet and still. A cool breeze drifted through, carrying the faint scent of wild grass mixed with the sweetness of chocolate. Noah sat perched on a chair beside Peter, his short legs swinging above the floor. His bright blue eyes sparkled as he chattered away. Daddy, did you know spider monkeys can use their tails like hands? I saw it in a book about tropical animals. They're amazing at climbing, and I think they never fall. Peter froze for a second at the word daddy, spoken so naturally, but then the corners of his mouth lifted into a warm smile. Leaning on the armrest of his wheelchair, he focused on the boy. That's right, Noah. It's called a prehensile tail. In the rainforest, they use it to balance and reach fruit. You know, they can even hang upside down using just their tails. Noah's eyes lit up like lanterns. He leaned closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a great secret. I told my classmate about that, but he didn't believe me. Now you said it too. So I was right. Peter laughed, the sound bubbling up lightly, as though he had rediscovered something long lost. His entire body seemed renewed by the boy's innocent excitement. I'll show you real photos. Back when I worked in the South American jungle, I saw them with my own eyes. Really? Noah's eyes went wide. You met them? Yes, they live high up in the tallest trees. I remember one spider monkey sitting on a branch, staring at me like it was saying, "Stranger, what are you doing here?" Noah burst out laughing, leaning his little head against Peter's arm, his shoulders shaking with pure delight. Clara stood nearby, her hand tightening unconsciously around her glass. That image, her son radiant with joy, and Peter, the man who had been both her deepest love and deepest wound, blended together as though 5 lost years had never passed. But Noah wasn't done. He inhaled, eager to go on. Daddy, I also know about sloths. They only go to the bathroom once a week. Aunt Maggie told me. Is that true? Peter nodded with exaggerated seriousness. It's true. And you know what? That's the most dangerous time for them. When they climb down to the ground, predators often attack them while they're doing their business. Noah's eyes widened, then he giggled. That's so funny, but also so sad for them. Peter placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. You have a kind heart, Noah. Not only do you notice things, but you care about them. That's the most important thing of all. Clara's eyes blurred with tears. Peter's words were more than facts. They were the first lessons of a father to his son. She saw pride glimmering in his eyes, the pride they should have shared years ago when Noah first learned to walk. In that moment, Clara felt both guilt and a deep, stirring emotion. Guilt for keeping them apart for so long, moved because at last Noah was receiving what he deserved, a father's presence. And somewhere within her, a fragile seed of hope began to grow, that losses could be healed and a family might still have a chance to be whole again. Noah lifted his head, his voice bubbling with excitement. Daddy, tomorrow, can we go see real animals? Not just in books, but in real life? Peter hesitated, then turned his eyes to Clara. A silent question passed between them. Could he be part of his son's life, not only today, but in all the days to come? Clara faltered for a moment. She wanted to shield Noah from new wounds, but when she saw her son's pleading eyes, then the hopeful light in Peter's, every word of refusal dissolved. She gave a small nod. It was enough. Peter understood. The path had opened, a path filled with obstacles, but also the promise of healing. He turned back to Noah, smiling brighter than he had since the accident. Tomorrow I'll take you. I promise. Noah threw his arms around him, laughter ringing out in the quiet space, as if erasing the years of absence. And Clara, her heart trembled with every beat, carrying pain, tenderness, and hope. Night draped Lakewood Estate like a sheer veil. Strings of golden lights strung across the trees cast their glow over the still surface of the lake. The hum of crickets blended with the faint music of dancing from afar. Clara stood on the wooden porch, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea, her eyes reflecting the glittering points of light scattered across the water. From here, she could still glimpse Peter and Noah inside the side hall near the chocolate fountain. A man in a wheelchair leaning slightly forward, and a little boy resting his cheek against his father's shoulder, nibbling strawberries and whispering stories only the two of them could share. Her heart clenched. The longer she watched, the deeper the quiet fear spread through her chest, a fear she had never dared name, that Peter would take Noah away from her. Hiding out here? Maggie's voice floated from behind, soft as the breeze. The bride's white gown rustled against the wood as she closed the door, leaned against the frame, and slipped off her veil, letting her brown hair fall over her shoulders. Not hiding, Clara forced a smile. Just breathing. Maggie walked over, reached for a sip of tea, then wrinkled her nose. More bitter than I expected. She glanced inside where Noah burst into laughter as Peter mimicked a spider monkey clinging to a tree. That picture, it's beautiful. Beautiful, Clara admitted, her voice thin as thread. So beautiful, it scares me. Maggie didn't answer right away. She pulled out a chair, sat beside Clara, and left just enough silence for her friend to gather the tangled threads of her emotions. I know what you're thinking, Maggie finally said. That Peter will want custody. That lawyers will come knocking. That Noah could be torn in two. Clara gripped her cup, her fingertips turning white. You know me too well. Yes, Maggie sighed. But Clara, you also know this. Noah deserves both his mother and his father. The words fell into the night like a pin striking the most sensitive nerve. Clara shut her eyes. In the darkness, the memories returned sharp and clear. Her trembling hand on a pregnancy test, the small kitchen smelling of stale coffee, unanswered emails, a phone silent as stone. Then the nights of teething fevers, the times she held Noah by the window listening to the rain, whispering stories about a distant hero neither of them had ever called by name. For 5 years she had been mother and father, the shield standing between her son and the threat of being abandoned again. I don't know what to believe, Clara murmured. In Peter, in his endurance, or in the lessons I learned through tears that you never bet your child's future on anyone but yourself? You can believe in time, Maggie replied, and in boundaries. Clara turned to her. Boundaries. Set principles from the start. No one gets to storm into Noah's life like a hurricane, Maggie said, her voice gentle but firm. Clear visiting schedules. What should and shouldn't be told to him. Consistency, and above all, actions over promises. She smiled faintly. If Peter is serious, he'll respect that. If he's only chasing a whim, those boundaries will filter him out. Clara stayed quiet, listening to her heartbeat slow. Her mind spoke. Yes, don't deny, don't run. Build boundaries. Protect Noah with structure, not with silence. Maggie tilted her head, her eyes searching Clara's. Did you see Noah with Peter? He lit up, like a missing piece finally fell into place. Clara bowed her head. The image seared her vision. Noah laughing so hard his shoulders shook when Peter described sloths climbing down from trees on their big day, then immediately softening, pitying a creature he had never met. Her son, bright, tender, and sensitive, like her, and like Peter. As natural as inheritance, as miraculous as time answering back. You're not alone anymore, Clara, Maggie said, laying a hand on hers. But you don't need to hand over all the keys tonight. Just open the door a crack. Let the light in little by little. Clara let out a small laugh at the metaphor. A crack. I can do that. Maggie's eyes twinkled mischievously. And one more thing. Don't punish yourself for surviving what you had to survive. Guilt will make you suspicious of happiness. And happiness is fragile. It needs to be welcomed, not interrogated. The breeze from the lake carried the scent of pine and cold water. Clara inhaled deeply, her chest loosening as if a valve had been released. Somewhere inside, the waltz shifted into a lazy jazz tune. Noah's laughter rang out, reaching them like an answer. All right, Clara said, her voice steadier. Tomorrow, Peter said he'd take Noah to see animals. I'll go too. Not to supervise, but to set foundations, routines, communication, and how to end a visit. Tonight I'll write it down. Timing, safety, bedtime, how to answer the question, why am I only meeting Daddy now? And I'll insist everything is said in front of each other, so Noah doesn't get caught between two stories. That's the Clara I know. Maggie stood embracing her friend, the scents of lavender and powder from her wedding gown mingling together. Steady, thoughtful, and brave. The side hall door creaked open. Noah shot out onto the porch like an arrow, chocolate still on his hands, eyes sparkling. Mommy! Daddy and I made a chocolate volcano erupt. He stopped short at the sight of Maggie letting out a long, ooh! The most beautiful bride in the world. Maggie pretended to bow formally, her eyes smiling. Thank you, young gentleman. Right behind Noah, Peter appeared. He paused at the threshold, the light from the hall framing his black jacket, the wheelchair's outline casting a long shadow on the wooden floor. His gaze met Clara's, not eager, not demanding, but patient, like someone waiting at the shore, ready to step into the water only if the other gave the nod. "Clara," he said, voice deep, each word carefully chosen, "thank you for letting me be with him tonight." She gave a small nod. "Thank you for being gentle." Peter pressed his lips together, exhaled, his eyes glistening with tears. "I'm learning." A heartbeat later, Clara turned to Noah, wiping chocolate from his chin. "Tired yet, kiddo?" Noah shook his head wildly, but a traitorous yawn slipped out. He grinned sheepishly, hugged Maggie, then wrapped his arms around Peter. A child's embrace, whole, unconditional, teaching the adults how to forgive. "Tomorrow we're really going, Daddy," Noah mumbled, his eyes already drooping. "Yes," Peter answered, his chin brushing his son's hair, his voice soft as silk. "I promise." Clara looked at them, and it felt as though the door inside her chest, the one she had built with 5 years of defenses, was opening, just as Maggie said. Not flung wide for storms to batter through, but just enough for warmth to slip in, soothing her rough edges. "Tomorrow," she said, turning to Peter. 9 o'clock, south shore of the lakeside park. I'll bring snacks, and we'll let Noah know in advance when the outing ends, so he doesn't feel let down." Peter nodded, gratitude lighting his eyes. "I'll bring folding chairs for all three of us. And a sketchbook for Noah." At the word sketchbook, Noah popped up like a spring. "I'll draw spider monkeys and sloths and a flying chocolate fountain." Maggie burst out laughing, ruffling his hair. "Young sir, leave the flying fountain to the bride to figure out." They all laughed together. The sound rang through the night like glass bells chiming, so pure it made Clara's throat tighten. She squeezed her son's hand, lifted her gaze to the dark sky, where a few stars peeked through the pines, and whispered to herself, "I will protect Noah with light, not with shadows." As they turned back inside, Peter wheeled back to give her space, every motion slow and respectful. Clara paused as she passed him, murmuring just for him to hear, "Thank you for respecting his pace." Peter replied quietly, "I always will." The night outside remained smooth and dark, but inside Clara, the stone wall had stopped crumbling. The fear hadn't vanished, but it had softened, taken shape, gained a name, become something she could face. And upon that fear, something new was sprouting, a small trust and a clear path forward. She hadn't forgiven the past, but she had chosen to move ahead, step by step, slowly, with the people she loved. Night had fully settled. Lakewood Estate shed its music and applause, leaving Lake Tahoe quiet and glimmering like a darkened mirror. Strings of fairy lights stretched from the wooden porch to the birch trees, their golden glow trembling across the water. The breeze carried the sharp scent of pine and the lingering trace of lavender from the wedding, cool, sobering. Clara stood at the wooden railing, fingers laced together to still their trembling, her gaze following the ripples left by a lone wild duck gliding past. Behind her came the soft sound of wheels brushing against wood. Peter stopped beside her, leaving just enough space so their breaths wouldn't collide. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me alone," he began, voice low and careful. Clara nodded, not turning. "We don't really have a choice. These things need to be said." Silence hovered. Light from the side hall spilled outward, tracing the edges of Peter's vest and casting his shadow long across the porch like a dark ink stain. He tilted his head slightly, as though tempted to study her face in this light, but held back, afraid to disturb the fragile surface between them. "Clara, I'm afraid," she cut in, her voice low but steady, as if she had to speak before fear clogged her throat. "Afraid you'll regret this. Afraid you'll come and go. Afraid one day Noah will ask why his father promised and then disappeared. I've lived through enough maybes to know a child's heart can't withstand being juggled like that." Peter swallowed hard. "I understand, and I deserve that doubt, but No, you don't understand." She turned, eyes glistening but unyielding. 5 years, Peter. For 5 years I erased your name from every quick answer on my lips, from every lullaby. I chose silence so my son wouldn't grow up with the story that his father had left. I didn't know you'd been in an accident, but to a child, the reason doesn't matter as much as the result. And the result was, he had no father. Her last words cut like a blade, fair, yet merciless. Peter's hands clenched the rims of his chair until his knuckles whitened. Pain glistened wet in his eyes, but his voice held its rhythm. And for me, the result was I had no son. I missed everything. His first cry, his first step, his first fever, his first day of preschool. I missed even the chance to apologize to you when it mattered. Clara faltered. Anger still bristled in her chest, but between the thorns something softened. I don't need beautiful apologies, she whispered. I need stability. I know. Peter inhaled deeply, as if both judged and self-condemned. I'm not here to demand, but to ask, to step into Noah's life, piece by piece, by your rules. No battles, no breaking lines. I want to learn how to be a father, at the right pace. Clara studied him, as if searching for a compass in his eyes. The lake reflected scattered lights, fractured by the breeze. Rules, she said, testing him. A fixed schedule. Any change must be announced in advance. Everything said to Noah, we say together. No mom's version and dad's version. One story only, so he doesn't get lost between tracks. Agreed, Peter answered instantly without pause. And, Clara hesitated, you must stay. Not in geography, but in commitment. I can't bear the thought of you blazing with excitement for a few weeks, then fading away when work calls. Peter met her gaze, his eyes dark and deep as the lake past midnight. I'm not going anywhere. My work is currently in Seattle, and I've already relocated my project team to the Northwest. I'll drive down to Portland every week. If needed, I'll rent an apartment near Noah's school. He paused, his voice softening. I lost the ability to run, Clara, but I've learned patience and perseverance. A faint smile tugged at her lips, holding back the tear at the corner of her eye. Patience doesn't heal everything, but it gives us time to. Peter exhaled as though dropping a stone from his chest. I want to make it up, not with expensive gifts or grand promises, with presence. By knowing the names of his best friend, his teacher, and his favorite stuffed animal. By laughing at the same story the 10th time he tells it. A smile slipped through Clara's lips before she could stop it. The stuffed animal's name is Pecan. He calls it that because its color looks like a pecan nut. Pecan, Peter repeated, like memorizing a password. Dad will remember. Their words warmed the air around them. But 5 years of distance couldn't be filled by a handful of agreements. It required exposing scars, letting each see how the other had bled. Do you hate me? Clara asked suddenly, meeting his eyes. For keeping Noah from you? Peter didn't answer at once. The lake shifted slightly under the night breeze. Yes, he said honestly. I hate missing what I should have witnessed. I hate that his first photos don't include me. I even hate myself for going so far. I couldn't come back in time. He swallowed, his voice rough. But hate isn't the path forward. The path is now. Now, Clara echoed, as if testing the shape of a future. Then how do we begin now? Peter blinked, his pupils brightening like sparks. Tomorrow, Lakeside Park, 9 o'clock. I'll bring Noah a sketchbook. We'll walk slowly and rest when he's tired. At noon, we'll end his lunchtime, without breaking routine. Next week, if it goes well, I'll come to Portland. We'll take him to his art class together. On nights I'm not there. FaceTime, 30 minutes, and he drew a breath. Every big decision, you'll be in the room. The wind stirred, dropping a birch leaf into Clara's hand. She turned it between her fingers, as though touching a fold in time. The frogs in the South Marsh croak loudly, she said softly, suddenly veering the subject as if her heart had swerved too sharply. Noah's afraid of the noise, but he loves watching tadpoles hatch. He calls them 1,000 little dots that can swim. Peter laughed, a short, genuine sound so beautiful it stung Clara's eyes. 1,000 little dots that can swim, he repeated. Tomorrow we'll go find them. And if he cries when it's time to say goodbye, she asked, I'll promise him exactly when we'll meet again. By day, by hour. No soon, no vagueness. Clara nodded slowly. For the first time that night, her arms fell from their defensive circle around her body. "Peter," she said, her voice softening, "I won't promise this will be easy. I'm still afraid. But I'll open the door. Just a crack. You'll have to step lightly." "I'll step lightly," he replied, eyes never leaving hers. "But I'll keep stepping." A soft click sounded behind them. "Mommy!" Noah's voice, round and gentle, sliced through the night like a ribbon. The boy ran onto the porch with Maggie. The bride smiled, then tactfully slipped back, leaving a small space for the family. Noah leaned against his mother's leg, wide-eyed at the sea of lights. "It's so pretty," he whispered, then turned to Peter. "Daddy, can we bring Pecan tomorrow to see the dots that can swim?" "Of course," Peter said, his voice warm as a sun-dried quilt. "Pecan is our honorary scientist." Noah laughed so hard his eyes teared up. Then, as if remembering something important, he looked up, his blue eyes so deep they seemed to hold the tiny stars above. "I want us to be a family," he said slowly, clearly, as though reciting a spell. "If not today, then tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then the next day. But a family." The words fell onto the wooden floor, resonating like a soft bell in the palm of a hand. Clara felt her knees weaken. Peter's grip tightened on the rims of his chair, his pulse hammering at his throat. Clara knelt to her son's eye level, one arm wrapping Noah close, the other hand instinctively reaching out to rest on the rim of Peter's chair, forming an unspoken connection. "A family," she whispered, looking at her son, then at him. "Slowly, sweetheart. Step by step." "Step by step," Peter echoed, and for the first time that night, he extended his hand, brushing lightly against the back of Clara's. A touch with no claim, no demand, just the first stone laid upon still water. Ripples spread, overlapping, then softened. From a distance, Maggie raised her phone, then lowered it again, choosing to keep the moment for them alone. The night breeze grew warmer, and Lake Tahoe seemed to exhale in relief. Across the shore, a late lamp went dark, as if yielding to another kind of light. Quieter, steadier, now being kindled by the three hearts standing together. "Tomorrow at 9, Peter said, his eyes smiling through a thin veil of tears, "at the South Shore." "Tomorrow at 9, Clara agreed, and this time, within her nod lay not just an arrangement, but her own promise, a promise beneath the lake lights, to be brave enough to walk with them, even in the smallest of steps toward family. The next morning, pale golden sunlight slipped through the mountain range, scattering across Lake Tahoe like 1,000 broken mirrors. The air was crisp, fresh with the scent of pine resin and damp grass. Clara stepped out onto the wooden porch and saw Noah bounding around the yard in his bright orange life vest, his face glowing with excitement. Peter was waiting down at the dock. He wore a simple button-up shirt, his hands steady on the rims of his wheelchair. A small wooden boat bobbed gently against the ripples, already prepared. A resort staff member was helping adjust things so Peter could board easily with his son. "Noah, slow down! You'll fall!" Clara called out, though a smile tugged at her lips as she watched her son dash into Peter's arms. "Daddy, are we really going?" Noah asked, tilting his face up, his eyes sparkling like twin gems. "Of course," Peter nodded, his hand giving Noah's shoulder a light pat. "But first we check everything. Is your life vest buckled right? Are the oars secure?" A good explorer always prepares carefully. Noah puffed out his chest, standing tall as Peter checked each strap with playful seriousness, making the boy giggle uncontrollably. Clara watched, a lump rising in her throat. She was so used to doing everything alone, buckling Noah's vest, packing his meals, and now seeing Peter's care for their son filled her with both relief and a trembling fear that this happiness was too fragile to last. As the boat left the dock, the lake spread vast and endless. Its turquoise water reflected the clear sky streaked with thin clouds. The morning breeze carried Noah's laughter far and wide. Peter sat steady at the center, hands guiding the adapted oar grips fixed to the boat for him. Clara sat opposite, her gaze resting on the two of them. "Noah, do you see those birds?" Peter pointed upward, where a few seagulls circled in wide arcs. "Yes, they're flying in loops like drawing pictures in the sky." "That's right. That's how they catch the wind currents. When the air lifts them, they can soar higher without flapping their wings as much. Noah tilted his head, eyes shining. If I had wings, I'd do that too. I'd fly forever and never get tired. Peter laughed, a bright, unfamiliar joy rushing through him. For the first time, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like a father planting seeds of knowledge and dreams in his son's heart. Clara sat quietly, her chest tightening with conflicting emotions. She remembered the nights when Noah had asked, "Mommy, where's my daddy?" And she had dodged the question with a forced smile. Now the answer sat before her, flesh and blood. The boat drifted farther into the middle of the lake. Peter's oar dipped smoothly, water breaking into clear ripples. Noah suddenly pointed and squealed, "Daddy, look!" A fish jumped. Peter caught the flash of silver before it vanished beneath the water. His eyes lit up. That might have been a salmon. There are many here. If we're lucky, next time we can try fishing. Really? Noah's eyes went wide. Really? But fishing takes patience, like waiting for something important. Like today. I've waited 5 years to sit here with you. The words slipped out and Clara shivered. She glanced at him. His face was glowing, but his eyes carried a quiet weight of regret. Noah, oblivious, cheered. "I'll catch the biggest one and show Mommy." Clara laughed through her tears, smoothing her son's hair with trembling fingers. Her heart melted, aching and overflowing all at once. A little later, Peter taught Noah how to use a small pair of binoculars to scan the shoreline. He spoke patiently, step by step. "Hold it close to your eyes. Turn the dial until it's clear. See that big tree? That's a birch. Its bark can start fires in the forest because it burns easily, even when it's wet." Noah's eyes widened, repeating each word as if committing it to memory. Birch, fire starter, even wet. Peter laughed, ruffling his hair. "That's my little explorer." Clara clasped her hands in her lap. The morning light framed Peter's face, and she realized he was no longer the man who had once left their family behind. He was a father learning to love with his whole heart. Her eyes grew hot. Tears blurred the brilliance of the lake. But through the haze, she saw Noah leaning against Peter's shoulder, smiling with pure, unguarded joy. A joy she hadn't seen in 5 long years. As the boat neared the dock again, Noah let out a long yawn and slumped against his father's arm. Peter set the oar aside and wrapped his arms around his son, his gaze soft and unwavering. In that moment, he no longer felt the weight of his wheelchair or the sentence of motionless legs. He felt only this. He was a father, in every sense, for the very first time. Clara rose to reach for Noah, but stopped when she caught Peter's eyes. They spoke without words. "Let me hold him, just this once." Slowly, she sat back down, watching. Her heart ached, but not from pain, from a deep, raw tenderness that cracked open a space for hope. Peter lowered his head, whispering into his son's soft hair. "Daddy's here now, Noah. And Daddy's not going anywhere." Clara heard every word. Tears slid down her cheeks, but for the first time in years, they were tears of relief. Soul Stories fam, if you're watching on another channel, come home to us at Soul Stories, where tens of thousands of listeners and sharers come together. Afternoon at Lakewood Estate drifted by slowly, like a ribbon of golden light. After the boat ride, Noah had fallen fast asleep on the lounge chair in the guest room, clutching Pecan tightly against his chest, his lashes trembling as though brushing against soft, grassy dreams. Clara pulled a light blanket over him and quietly stepped out onto the porch. Lake Tahoe shimmered with silver scales. The sound of water lapping against the wooden steps pulsed like the steady breath of something alive and immense. Peter was already there, his hand resting on the railing, his wheelchair angled so he could face the water. The late sun slanted across his cheek, casting a pale golden streak that highlighted the strong jawline and the thin scar across his cheekbone. A reminder of the days he had fought his way back to life. He startled slightly at the sound of the door, then relaxed when he saw Clara. "Is he asleep?" he asked softly. "Yes," Clara smiled, out like he was hypnotized. "You two wore him out, with happiness." Peter chuckled and the sound softened Clara's heart. Then, as if gathering courage, he turned fully toward her, his face serious, his eyes simmering with long-held hesitation. "Clara," he began slowly, There's something difficult I need to say. She pulled a chair closer, settling so their eyes were level. The day I came back, Peter said, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. Not because of the scars or the thinning hair, because of this chair. His hand tightened on the rim of the wheel. I thought for a long time that I was a burden to my colleagues, to the world, and surely to you. That thought clung to me like moss. Everywhere I went, I saw steps that weren't meant for me. Clara said nothing. The breeze drifted through, carrying the scent of pine resin and the aged wood of the porch. I had to relearn everything, Peter continued, from moving around to opening doors, stacking things on low shelves, calculating every slope. The things that were once invisible became a never-ending list. And every time I looked up and saw people walking, running, leaping, I pulled into myself. I thought, if Clara were still here, she'd be exhausted. She deserves an easier life. So I disappeared. That was how I punished myself for losing everything. Clara felt her chest knot. She remembered the nights she had wondered why he had vanished like a ghost. She had believed it was a cruel choice. Now she saw it had been a shroud of shame, raw and unbearable. But today, Peter drew in a breath, when Noah leaned against my shoulder on the boat, when he said, "Daddy, wait, let me look a little longer," I suddenly realized there are places where no one asked me to run. They only need me to be there. Suddenly, this chair wasn't a sentence anymore. It was the way I could come closer to my son. Silence swelled. The lake behind him seemed to widen, deepen. Clara's eyes drifted to the hand gripping the wheel, the hand that had taught itself how to start over. Slowly, she placed her own hand over his, a light, deliberate touch. "Peter," she said, her voice low and warm, "you are not a burden." She paused, letting the words soak into the air, then added, "You are still a wonderful father. And the man I once loved." The confession hung heavy, like a lock clicking open after 5 years had passed. Clara felt her heart thud hard, as though she had dared to open a door long rusted shut. Peter didn't flinch. He looked directly into her eyes where the water's silver and the sun's glow reflected back. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for not calling me what I feared most." Clara smiled faintly. "We've both walked through darkness. I can't promise there won't be more fear, but I can promise this. When I'm afraid, I'll speak. No more punishing silence. No more building walls out of quiet." Peter nodded, his face lightening as if he'd set down a heavy pack. "And I promise, I'll ask. I'll listen. I'll make it up with small things. Like today, remembering a scarf for Noah when the wind picked up, changing course to avoid big waves because he gets seasick. Those small things. That's what makes a home." Clara let out a soft laugh. "You remembered about Noah's seasickness already?" "He's a little explorer," Peter shrugged with a smile. "Brave, but easily queasy." They both laughed. Not loud, but enough to break the veil of hesitation. Evening light wavered. A sparrow darted past, leaving a fleeting shadow across the wood. "Still," Clara said, slipping back into her practical tone, "we need boundaries. Not because I don't trust you, but because Noah deserves a clear routine. Tuesday and Thursday nights, video calls, second weekend of each month, Seattle or Portland, depending, but with a week's notice. Any changes, 24 hours ahead. And," she met his gaze, gentle but firm, "no promises you know you can't keep." Peter raised his hand in mock salute. "Yes, ma'am." "Don't joke," Clara scolded lightly. "I mean it." "So do I." His hand lowered, his eyes suddenly serious. "Clara, can I ask something, not about schedules, but about us?" He hesitated, like a man testing the first step of a new bridge. "When you said, 'the man I once loved,' does that mean someday there might be another version of that sentence?" The wind shifted. A sweet trace of wildflowers drifted past and faded. Clara turned her eyes to the lake, letting the soft light soothe her gaze. She measured the fear in her chest, still there, but less sharp. "Peter," she said slowly, "I don't want to leap ahead. I want Noah to be at the center of every decision. But She turned back, letting him see the truth in her eyes. What I feel today is like a door left ajar. It doesn't promise, but it isn't closed. Peter smiled, a mix of joy and restraint. A jar is enough. I'll knock very softly. And step very lightly, Clara teased. And steadily, he added, and they both smiled, as if completing a poem together. The guest room door creaked. Noah poked his head out, hair tousled, eyes foggy with sleep. Hugging Pecan, he stumbled onto the porch, staring at them for a moment before clambering straight into his mother's lap, then leaning over to wrap his arms around Peter's neck. A child's embrace, simple and whole. "Daddy," he mumbled, his voice rough with drowsiness. Pecan dreamed he could fly. Mommy said birds fly because of the wind. I think I can fly too if you hold my hand. Clara and Peter's eyes met over Noah's shoulders, and in that meeting, a thin light flickered. Quiet, steady. Hope, but not the blinding kind. A hope rooted in discipline, breathing with routine, built on concrete times and promises kept. "I'll hold your hand," Peter murmured, pressing a kiss to his son's warm hair. "And when the wind is too strong, I'll sit with you and watch it pass." Noah nodded, satisfied, as if he'd been given the perfect answer. He nestled deeper into his mother's arms and drifted back to sleep. Clara stroked his hair and looked up. "See?" she whispered with a smile. "Sometimes the wind only reminds us to close a window, not to build another wall." Peter chuckled under his breath. "And a window left ajar is to let the light in." They sat like that for a long time, a mother, a father, and a child asleep with his bare Pecan. Outside, Lake Tahoe deepened into twilight, the garden lights blinking on one by one, stitching golden threads across the purple sky. A pair of ducks cut slowly across the water, leaving ripples that stretched, then faded. Clara leaned slightly, her head brushing Peter's shoulder. Not a full lean, just a touch as light as silk, but enough for them both to understand. From now on, they would learn to walk together. Small steps, steady steps, gentle steps, certain steps. And in each step, a small hand would weave theirs together, guiding them toward the same side, the side of light, of measured promises, and of a family pieced back together by patience. On the edge of the porch, a birch leaf landed quietly on the rim of Peter's chair, like the faintest period at the end of a long sentence. But in their hearts, it wasn't an ending. It was an ellipsis, an invitation to continue, to write the next part of the story together. A month after that night at Lakewood Estate, autumn settled over Portland. The narrow street leading to Clara's apartment was blanketed with crimson and amber maple leaves. The air carried the earthy scent of damp soil and the crisp rustle of change, signals of a new season not only in nature, but in the lives of three people learning how to become a family again. Peter had kept his word. He worked with the Coal Industries Board to relocate most of his projects to the Portland branch. The headquarters remained in Seattle, but he had secured a small apartment just 10 minutes from Noah's preschool. When he signed the lease, he looked out the wide window, saw the faint outline of Noah's playground in the distance, and, for the first time in years, smiled at the quiet comfort of such a simple view. Their first evening in Peter's new apartment, Clara brought Noah over. The moment Noah stepped inside, he exclaimed, "Mommy, Daddy has a sofa as big as a castle. Can I pecan and jump on it?" Peter laughed, scooping his son into his arms. "Jump if you want, but remember the rule, no jumping with food in your hands." Clara shook her head, though a smile tugged at her lips. The room still smelled of fresh paint, but the warm lighting gave it a surprisingly homely feel. That night, Noah insisted that both parents read him a story. He lay in the middle of the bed, clutching Pecan, eyes wide as Clara read the first half of Where the Wild Things Are. And then Peter continued. His deep, steady voice broke into playful growls that made Noah giggle uncontrollably. By the time the story ended, the boy had drifted off, his breathing even. Clara and Peter sat side by side at the edge of the bed, watching their son sleep. And for the first time in years, both felt the warmth of a home they thought they had lost forever. On the weekend, they went together to a riverside park. Clara packed watercolors and Noah eagerly painted the maples, which were turning shades of red and gold. Peter couldn't sit on the grass, but he had brought a small easel he could set up beside his chair. He watched Noah carefully, guiding his hand with patient instructions. See? If you mix in just a little red, the leaf will glow as if it's on fire. Noah tried it, then turned proudly to show his mother. Mommy, look! I painted the fire of autumn. Clara's eyes misted. For years, she had taught Noah to paint alone, always feeling something was missing. Now seeing her son with a patient teacher by his side, she realized the missing piece was finally falling into place. They lunched on sandwiches and chocolate milk. Peter told Noah about the time he saw a rare blue butterfly in the jungle, and Clara added stories from her suburban childhood. Their laughter spilled across the grass, weaving with the rustling leaves like a family's own melody. Another evening, Peter invited them for dinner at his apartment. Clara walked in and noticed a small round table neatly set with 3 places. Peter was bustling at the stove, beads of sweat on his forehead. You actually cooked this? Clara teased. Peter grinned, self-deprecating. Learned from a cooking video. Can't promise it's as good as yours, but at least it won't need the fire department. When he brought out the pot of chicken soup, Noah clapped his hands and slurped loudly, showering praise between bites. Clara just watched, father and son laughing over soup, and felt something rare and precious. Peace. Not grand, not extravagant, but real. Slowly, new rhythms took shape. On Tuesday and Thursday evenings, Noah video called his father if they didn't meet in person. Every second weekend, they had an outing. Sometimes a science museum, sometimes just a small cafe with puzzles. Clara held firm to the rules she'd set, and Peter respected every one of them. What surprised Clara most was his patience. No matter how busy he was, Peter showed up on time. He didn't make sweeping promises. He simply appeared, with little things. A new book, a few curious leaves collected on a trip, or just Noah's favorite cookie. And it was that consistency, not grand gestures, that rebuilt Clara's trust. Trust didn't come from vows, but from ordinary evenings spent reading together, laughter on a grassy field, the light in Noah's eyes each time he saw his father waiting at the school gates. One late night, after Noah had gone to bed, Clara sat in her living room with her sketchbook half finished on the table. The desk lamp spilled warm light over the pages. Peter sat opposite, a cup of tea in his hand. Between them stretched not the old silence of avoidance, but a new one, calm, steady, full of presence. Clara, Peter said slowly, I know I still have much to prove. But looking at Noah today, I see clearly now that every pain I went through had a purpose, to make me understand the value of the simplest thing, being here, with him, with you. Clara lifted her eyes. Their gazes met, not just heavy with regret anymore, but glimmering faintly with something else. Hope. She nodded, her voice soft but sure. I'm starting to see it that way too. Outside, autumn wind rustled through the maples. Inside, the warmth of family filled the room, seeping into old cracks. And for the first time in years, Clara felt it clearly. Happiness didn't need to be loud. It came in small, steady rhythms, like the heartbeat in her chest, now beating in time with 2 others in the same room. A rainy afternoon draped Portland in streaks of water across the window panes. Clara sat in the kitchen, fingers turning a coffee cup absently, while her eyes stayed fixed on the envelope lying on the table. The bold Coal Industries logo stood out, along with several lines of Japanese printed across the contract header. Peter had just called with the news. The corporation had invited him to Tokyo to lead a clean energy project, one that would last at least 6 months. Clara's heart sank. Memories surged back. Empty apartments, hurried notes, endless business trips that had once stolen him away from their marriage. Her hands trembled as she set down the cup, steam rising and stinging her eyes. That evening, Peter arrived. His dark shirt was still damp from the rain. Noah rushed out to hug him, chattering excitedly about his drawing from school. Peter bent to listen with a smile, but when he looked up and met Clara's gaze, that smile faltered. After settling Noah at the table with crayons, Clara pulled Peter aside into the living room. The warm lamplight fell across her face, highlighting the strain etched there. You really accepted the Tokyo project? She asked, her voice hoarse, almost a whisper. Peter nodded, his eyes deepening. Yes, but I haven't signed yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Clara bit her lip, gripping her hands together to keep them from shaking. Peter, if you go, what about Noah? He's only just learned he has a father. Can you even imagine what it would do to a 5-year-old? To wait? To be left behind again? Her voice cracked, but her eyes never wavered. Peter lowered his head, fingers tightening on the rim of his wheelchair. I know you're afraid. I'm afraid too. But Clara, I'm not the man I was 5 years ago. Back then, I thought work was everything. Now it isn't. I've already lost too much. She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. I've heard that promise before. So many times, and every time it ended the same way. Me crying alone in the kitchen, pregnant, while you were somewhere I couldn't reach. The air thickened. At the dining table, the scratch of Noah's crayon sounded like a countdown clock. Peter drew in a breath and looked up. His eyes burned with a determination so fierce that Clara instinctively took a step back. Clara, I've already lost 5 years. 5 years of not knowing how my son grew up. 5 years of never hearing Noah's laugh, never seeing him fall and get back up again. For 5 years, you had to carry everything alone. I swear to you. His voice dropped, every word carved into the silence. I will not lose another single day. The vow cracked through the room like thunder. Clara froze, her heart racing wildly. His eyes no longer held just apology, but a pledge etched from pain. Suddenly, the scrape of a chair cut through the air. Noah stood there, eyes wet and wide. He had heard everything. Daddy, are you leaving again? His voice trembled, breaking. I don't want it to be just Mommy. I want Daddy too. Clara bent down to gather him, but Noah wriggled free and ran straight to Peter, wrapping his small arms tightly around his father's waist. Tears streamed down his cheeks, soaking into Peter's shirt. You're not going anywhere, Noah cried, sobs shaking his words. Peter was stunned, his arms trembling as he pulled his son close to him. Every defense, every argument was shattered. He lowered his chin onto Noah's tousled brown hair, and his own tears fell, mingling with his son's. Daddy's not going anywhere, he whispered, his voice shaking but steady. Listen, Noah, I'm here, always here. No project, no city is more important than you. I promise. Clara knelt beside them, wrapping her arms around both. Her tears flowed freely now, unstoppable. In that fragile, trembling embrace, the breath of all three mingled, warm and close. Noah hiccuped, lifting his tear-streaked face. His eyes still shone through the blur. Really? You won't disappear again, Daddy? Really, Peter nodded, solemn as though signing the most sacred contract of his life. I disappeared once, but now, every day I'll show up. For you, and for Mommy. Clara rested her forehead against his shoulder, whispering through her tears. Just keep your word. I will, Peter answered, gripping her hand in one, holding his son tight in the other. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside that small room, something had shifted. No longer the shadows of the past, but the fragile glow of a future bound together. Clara knew fear wouldn't vanish overnight, but for the first time, she felt Peter's resolve was not an illusion. The three sat there quietly, listening to the rain on the porch. Slowly, Noah's sobs faded into soft breaths as he fell asleep in their arms. Clara and Peter looked at each other over their son's closed lashes, and in each other's eyes they saw not only the weight of what they had lost, but the beginning of a vow, sealed with tears, blood, and the love they both carried for the boy sleeping between them. Thank you for being part of Soul Stories. If you're listening on another channel, come back to the official home so you can continue our love journeys together with the Soul Stories family. Portland was dressed in festive colors. Along the streets, bare maple trees shimmered with strings of lights. Shop windows overflowed with wreaths and Santa figurines. Snow hadn't fallen yet, but the chill was sharp enough to turn each breath into a puff of white. In the small apartment, Clara hung a few more red ornaments on the Christmas tree standing in the corner of the living room. Noah ran circles around it, a red knit cap bouncing on his messy hair, clutching Pecan tight as he asked over and over, Mommy, will Daddy make it back in time? Santa's coming soon. Clara smiled faintly, brushing her hand against his cheek. Daddy promised, so he'll come. But deep inside, worry gnawed at her. Peter was still overseeing a project in Tokyo, and his schedule had been relentless. Yet just as the clock struck 7, a knock came at the door. Noah bolted to open it, shouting, "Daddy!" There stood Peter, coat dusted with cold, cheeks flushed from the wind. He scooped Noah into his arms and spun him around, their laughter ringing out and blending with the soft carols playing from the little speaker in the room. Clara stood watching, warmth blooming in her chest. After a simple but cozy dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes and gingerbread, Peter placed a long, silver-wrapped box beneath the tree. Noah's eyes grew wide, but Peter winked. Not until after we sing Silent Night. The three of them sat around the glowing tree, golden lights flickering across their smiles. Clara listened to Noah's young voice blending with Peter's deep tone, and her chest tightened with emotion. It felt as though every old fracture in her heart was being stitched back together by the gentle melody. Finally, the moment came. Noah tore the shiny paper and gasped at the telescope inside. "Really, Daddy?" "For me?" Peter nodded, his gaze filled with tenderness. "Yes, my little stargazer. From now on, we'll explore the universe together." Noah shrieked with joy, hugging his father tightly before dragging both parents out to the balcony with the telescope. Above them, the night sky stretched clear, scattered with thousands of glittering stars. Peter adjusted the tripod, his voice patient as he guided Noah. "Put your eye here. Turn it gently. Do you see that constellation? That's Orion. And the brightest star over there? That's Sirius." Noah pressed his eye to the lens, then cried out, "I see it! Oh, wow, it's beautiful! Mommy, look!" Clara leaned in beside him. In Noah's wide eyes, she saw a universe of stars sparkling like dreams made real. Suddenly, he turned and wrapped his arms around both parents, his voice trembling with joy. "This is the best Christmas ever, because now we're a real family." The words fell into the room, simple yet resonant as distant church bells. Clara froze, tears spilling from her eyes. Peter's face broke too, his hands trembling as he pulled them both into his embrace. Under the glow of Christmas lights, the three hearts beat together as one. Clara and Peter locked eyes over Noah's small shoulders. In that gaze, there was no anger, no distance, only love, and the fragile, healing return of trust. "Thank you for coming back," Clara whispered. Peter squeezed her hand, his eyes warm and sure. Out on the balcony, the night sky shone brilliantly, as if the universe itself smiled on this sacred moment. That night, when Noah fell asleep, still clutching pecan and mumbling about the stars, Clara and Peter sat together on the sofa. The tree glowed softly, and the scent of gingerbread lingered in the air. "Do you hear it?" Clara whispered. "Hear what?" Peter asked. "The heartbeat of a home." Peter chuckled softly, taking her hand. "This Christmas, I don't need to wish for anything else. The miracle I wanted is already here." Clara rested her head on his shoulder. Beyond the window, the brightest star twinkled faintly, as if sending its blessing to a family that had finally found its way back to one another. A year later, the wooden house by the lake in Portland overflowed with laughter. Every morning, sunlight streamed through the wide glass windows, scattering reflections across the shimmering water. Clara often stood in the kitchen stirring a pot of oatmeal, while Noah chased their newly adopted puppy around the yard, his bright voice ringing across the garden. Peter sat on the porch, laptop open on the low wooden table. Work was still demanding, but now he chose to do much of it remotely, arranging his schedule so that every afternoon he could ride bikes with his son around the lake, or water the plants and tidy the garden with Clara. The house wasn't large, but it was warm, a little nest they had spent years finding their way back to. That evening marked exactly 1 year since their Christmas miracle had occurred. The town sparkled with holiday lights, but the air inside their lakeside home was warmer still with togetherness. Clara spread a cloth over the wooden porch table and prepared a simple dinner: roast chicken, grilled vegetables, and a chocolate cake Noah had insisted on decorating with colorful candies. "Mommy, Daddy, look! I spelled family with candy!" Noah shouted, his blue eyes shining as if they reflected the whole sky. Clara laughed, ruffling his hair. Peter watched from across the room, his chest tightening with emotion. Over the past year, he had seen his son grow day by day and had watched Clara slowly release her fears, opening her heart again. And now he knew. It was time to do something important. After dinner, he led Clara down to the lake. Noah had been told in advance. He stayed quietly inside with Pecan, bursting with the excitement of keeping a big secret. Outside, the night breeze rippled gently across the glassy water, reflecting thousands of stars overhead. Peter stopped at the wooden railing, turning to face Clara. His eyes burned, not from lights or fire, but from a resolve long ripened. "Clara," he began, voice trembling but steady, "this past year, we've lived as a family. I've seen you smile more. I've seen Noah happier. I know I can't give back the 5 years we lost, but I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, a simple yet elegant ring gleamed under the moonlight. "I'm asking you to marry me again," Peter whispered, eyes locked on hers. "Not to start over, but to continue the journey we left unfinished. Not to be a temporary family, but to make us permanent." Clara froze, her breath caught in her chest. All the old memories, days of pain, nights of loneliness, hidden tears, dissolved like mist in the light of his gaze. What remained was only the present, the man before her, the father of her son, the one who had spent the last year proving he was here to stay. Tears shimmered in her eyes like falling stars. She nodded, her lips trembling into a radiant smile. "Yes, I will." Peter exhaled in relief, his hands shaking as he slid the ring onto her finger. As the band touched her skin, it felt as though an old wound had finally been stitched closed with the thread of trust. Clara couldn't hold back anymore. She stepped forward, wrapping her arms around him. He held her tightly as if keeping the whole world safe in his embrace. The regrets of the past vanished, leaving only the pure, overwhelming joy of this moment. Noah, unable to contain his curiosity, burst out of the house. When he saw the ring glittering on his mother's hand, he shouted, "Mommy said yes, didn't she?" "I heard Daddy practicing that line all week." Both parents laughed, scooping him up in a three-way hug. Noah jumped up and down, his innocent joy sparkling like fireworks. The three of them sat down on the wooden railing, Lake Portland shimmering below, a sky full of stars above. Clara leaned against Peter's shoulder, while Noah nestled snugly between them, his small hands clutching both parents tightly. No lavish words were needed, no grand wedding required. This moment, together under the endless sky, was enough to prove they had truly found their family again. Clara whispered softly, eyes lifted to the heavens. "Do you see it? The stars look brighter tonight." Peter smiled, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "They're not brighter. We just see them differently, because we're looking together." Noah squealed, pointing at a shooting star that streaked across the sky. I wish we'll always stay together, just like this." Clara's tears spilled as she hugged him tight. Peter looked at them both, his heart overflowing with gratitude. He knew the wish wasn't just Noah's, it was his, and Clara's too. The night grew late. The lake breeze turned cool, but their embrace radiated warmth. They stayed like that for a long time, until the house lights dimmed and only the whisper of the universe remained. And so the story didn't end with eternal vows or dramatic declarations, but with a simple image. A small family, hand in hand, heart to heart. They had endured loss, misunderstanding, and fear, only to rediscover happiness. And beneath the star-filled sky, they knew this with certainty. This was the true beginning.